I'm Amanda, 28 years old, an accountant who for 7 years has been meticulously saving for my wedding. Daniel, my fiancé, and I announced our engagement, and I was thrilled to finally use the fund I had built. Then came Thanksgiving dinner with my entire extended family. My mother stood up, a raised champagne glass serving as her symbol of family unity. Mom smiled. Amanda has generously decided, she announced, to give her wedding fund to Sophie. The room froze. I hadn't agreed to anything. I hadn't said a word. And yet they applauded, just assuming I would give in like I always had. Before I continue with what happened next, let me know in the comments below where you are watching from. Also, if your family has ever taken advantage of your generosity, hit that subscribe button and join our community of storytellers and listeners. Growing up in suburban Chicago in a middle-class family, my place in the hierarchy was always clear to me. From my earliest memories, an unspoken rule existed in our household. Sophie, my sister, 3 years my junior, was the special one, the golden child who needed endless praise, attention, and protection. I, on the other hand, was expected to be the responsible one, the achiever who needed to set an example. When I brought home an A-, my parents asked why it wasn't an A. When Sophie brought home a C, there was celebration because at least she had tried her best. This pattern became so normal to me that I stopped questioning it. I internalized the message that her accomplishments were exceptional while mine were simply expected. By 16, I was working part-time at a local grocery store, saving money for college and helping with household expenses. Throughout high school, Sophie never held a steady job. I mentioned this disparity once, and my mother gave me a disappointed look. "Your sister is sensitive," she said. "She needs to focus on finding herself." I nodded and returned to my homework, suppressing the burn of injustice. College only widened the gap. I attended a state university on a partial scholarship, working 2 jobs to cover my living expenses and the remaining tuition. I graduated with honors and $20,000 in student loans. Sophie, however, attended a private university that was fully funded by my parents. She changed majors 3 times and took 5 years to graduate with a degree in communications. After college, I began my career as an accountant at a respected firm. I worked overtime, took additional certifications, and methodically built my professional reputation. Meanwhile, Sophie cycled through jobs in retail, fashion, social media management, consulting, interior design, and event planning. None lasted more than 8 months. Each time she quit or was let go, my parents would explain that the job wasn't the right fit for her creative spirit. I met Daniel at a professional conference 3 years ago. He was a financial analyst with a quick wit and kind eyes that saw straight through my carefully constructed facade of contentment. On our 3rd date, after he met my family at a Sunday dinner, he asked me point blank, "Do you realize how differently your parents treat you and your sister?" His question startled me. Having an outsider name something I'd normalized for 25 years was both validating and terrifying. Daniel noticed how my parents interrupted me but hung on Sophie's every word. How they praised her new haircut but didn't comment on my recent promotion. How they asked me to help clean up while Sophie scrolled through her phone at the table. "That is just how it has always been," I told him with a practiced shrug. "It does not have to be," he replied, taking my hand. "You deserve better." Over the next 2 years, Daniel gently encouraged me to establish boundaries with my family. Small things at first, like declining last-minute requests to drive Sophie to appointments when she forgot to fill her gas tank. I stopped lending her money that was never repaid. I learned to say no to my parents when they asked me to just help out your sister one more time. With each boundary, I felt both guilty and liberated. Daniel celebrated these small victories with me, reminding me that healthy relationships require mutual respect. When we got engaged, I made a decision our wedding would be funded by us alone. For 7 years, I had been saving diligently, setting aside a portion of every paycheck into a special account labeled Future Wedding. The balance had grown to $35,000, enough for the modest but beautiful celebration we envisioned. "This is something just for us," I told Daniel. "No strings attached." 6 months before our wedding date, Sophie was terminated from her job at a marketing agency for chronic unrest. At 25 years old, she moved back into our parents' house. During our weekly phone calls, my mother began dropping hints. "Your sister is going through such a difficult time. It is so expensive to live these days, especially when starting over. Family has to stick together during a crisis." I recognized the familiar pressure building. They wanted me to offer financial help to Sophie. But this time, I had something precious to protect, something that was finally just for me. My wedding fund represented years of sacrifice and discipline. It was the first truly selfish thing I had allowed myself, and I was determined to preserve it. I had no idea just how far my parents would go to redirect my resources towards Sophie. No idea that 28 years of being the reliable daughter, the one who always gave in, had set the stage for the ultimate betrayal. Thanksgiving has always been a big production in our family. My mother spends weeks planning the menu. My father cleans the house to military precision, and relatives drive in from 3 neighboring states. This year was no different on the surface, though looking back, there were warning signs I should have noticed. My mother was unusually attentive when Daniel and I arrived, taking my coat with a warm smile and commenting on how lovely I looked. Typically, her attention would be immediately captured by Sophie or my younger cousins. Sophie herself was suspiciously cheerful despite her recent job loss. Dressed in a new outfit I later learned cost nearly $400, though she had claimed to be completely broke when declining to chip in for our grandmother's birthday gift the week before. The dining room table stretched to accommodate 22 people with autumnal centerpieces and my mother's best china. I was seated between my father's brother, Uncle Jim, and Daniel, with Sophie directly across from me, flanked by my parents. Throughout the turkey carving and initial courses, conversation flowed normally. Aunt Patricia discussed her recent cruise to Alaska. My cousin Taylor announced her acceptance to medical school. Daniel charmed the table with stories from his childhood in rural Pennsylvania. As pumpkin pie was being served, my father tapped his knife against his water glass, the clear ring silencing the multiple conversations around the table. "Everyone, if I could have your attention for a moment," he said, standing. "Margaret and I have a special announcement." My mother rose beside him, her hand resting on Sophie's shoulder. Sophie was practically vibrating with excitement. A smile stretched across her face. As you all know, my mother began. Our Sophie has had some setbacks recently in her career journey. A few sympathetic nods around the table. My stomach tightened instinctively. And as you also know, Amanda and Daniel are planning their wedding for next spring. All eyes turned to us. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. Well, my mother continued, her voice rising with emotion, we are so proud to share some wonderful news. As a symbol of family unity, Amanda has generously decided to give her wedding fund to Sophie. The room froze. I certainly froze. My brain struggled to process the words I had just heard. Sophie will use this money to enroll in a prestigious interior design program and finally pursue her true passion, my father added proudly. Sophie wiped an imaginary tear. I am just so grateful to my amazing sister. Confusion gave way to slow, uncertain applause that built as relatives processed this apparent act of extraordinary generosity. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. Daniel's grip on my hand tightened to an almost painful degree. I did not. I finally managed, but my voice was drowned out by Aunt Kathy's exclamation. What a beautiful sacrifice! Amanda, you have always been such a giving soul. How much money are we talking about? Uncle Jim asked bluntly. $35, my father announced proudly. Amanda has been saving for years. More applause, murmurs of approval. Someone patted my shoulder. But what about your wedding? My cousin, Taylor asked me directly. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. Oh, Amanda and Daniel have decided on a simple courthouse ceremony instead, much more practical, really. Daniel cleared his throat. Actually, that is not something we have discussed. My mother smoothly interrupted. Who wants coffee with their pie? Jim, I know you take yours black, right? Just like that, the subject was changed. As dessert proceeded, relatives approached me individually to praise my generosity, my selflessness, my love for my sister. Each time I tried to explain that I had never agreed to this arrangement, someone would interrupt or Sophie would appear, throwing her arms around me for a photo opportunity. You are the best sister ever, she whispered loudly enough for nearby relatives to hear. Throughout it all, Daniel remained a steady presence beside me, his calm exterior belying the protective anger I could feel radiating from him. As guests began to leave, I pulled my parents aside in the kitchen, Sophie trailing behind them like a shadow. What was that? I demanded, my voice shaking. I never agreed to give Sophie my wedding money. Never. My mother's expression hardened slightly, though her voice remained honey-sweet. Amanda, we discussed how Sophie needs help right now. Your wedding is still months away, and you and Daniel are both doing well financially. We are doing well because we work hard and save responsibly, Daniel interjected. My father stepped forward. No one is saying Amanda is not responsible. In fact, it is because she is so responsible that she can help her sister in this time of need. But that money is already gone, Sophie said with a casual shrug. Mom and Dad transferred it to my account this morning. I have already paid the enrollment deposit for my program. The room spun around me. You did what? That money was in my personal account. It was in the joint account, my mother corrected. The one we helped you set up years ago for emergencies and family needs? I had forgotten. When I first started saving for my wedding, I used an account my parents had helped me establish when I was 21. I had meant to transfer the funds to a solo account after meeting with our wedding venue, but with work deadlines and wedding planning, it had slipped my mind. "This is theft," Daniel said quietly. My father's face darkened. "Watch yourself, young man. We are family here. Family helps family." The drive home was painful. I alternated between rage, disbelief, and the familiar weight of guilt they had expertly installed in me since childhood. Daniel drove in silence for 20 minutes before finally speaking. "Amanda, what they did was wrong. Legally and morally wrong." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I know. So, what are we going to do about it?" The question hung in the air between us. For the first time in my life, I was going to have to truly stand up to my family, not just in small boundary settings, but in a significant confrontation. The thought terrified me, and yet, as we pulled into our apartment complex, I felt something else beneath the fear: resolve. "I am going to get my money back," I said. "Whatever it takes." Daniel and I stayed up until 3 o'clock in the morning, discussing what had happened and what to do next. I checked my bank account on my phone, confirming what Sophie had said. The account that had held $35,000 that morning now showed a balance of just $89.12. A transfer had been made at 9:30 a.m. while Daniel and I were still driving to my parents' house for Thanksgiving. "They planned this whole thing," I said, staring at the transaction record. "They did it before we even arrived, knowing I would be less likely to make a scene in front of the entire family." Daniel nodded grimly. "It was calculated. The question is, what now?" I called my parents at 7:30 the next morning, not caring if I woke them. My mother answered with a cheerful "Good morning, sweetheart," as if nothing had happened. "I want my money back," I said without preamble. "All of it, today." Her tone changed immediately. "Amanda, we have been through this. The money has been allocated to Sophie's program. This is a family decision made without me about my money. Honestly, I thought you would be happy to help your sister after all the advantages you have had." I nearly choked. "Advantages? I worked for everything I have, and now Sophie needs a chance to work for what she wants. The program starts in January. This is her chance to finally find her path. Mom, that money was for my wedding. Daniel and I have been planning, booking vendors. We have contracts. You can have a small wedding or wait another year. Sophie's opportunity is now." When my father got on the phone, his approach was different but equally frustrating. "Amanda, your sister has real problems. You have always been the stable one, the one we do not have to worry about. Sophie needs this chance. If you were in her position, we would do the same for you. But they never had. When I needed college money, I got loans and jobs. When I needed a car for work, I saved for a down payment. When I wanted to move into my first apartment, I budgeted for months to afford the security deposit. We agreed to meet in person that weekend to discuss the situation. Daniel came with me for support, despite my parents' insistence that this was family business. Daniel is family, I said firmly as we sat in their living room. We are getting married, remember? With the wedding we now cannot afford. Sophie, Do, lounged nearby, scrolling through her phone and occasionally glancing up with a satisfied smirk. My parents sat across from us, arms crossed, expressions communicating that this meeting was a courtesy, not a negotiation. We discussed this weeks ago. My mother insisted you agreed that family has to support each other. I never agreed to give Sophie $35,000. Not in those exact words, my father conceded. But you understand the principle. The principle of taking my money without permission. Sophie finally looked up from her phone. Don't be so dramatic, Amanda. It is not like you and Daniel are poor, and this program will finally give me the credentials I need for a real career, like the marketing certificate, or the event planning workshop, or the social media management course. I listed her previous abandoned career attempts. Her face flushed. That is so unfair. This is different. I have found my passion. Your passion this month, Daniel muttered. I took a deep breath, trying a different approach. Mom, Dad, regardless of whether Sophie needs help, this was my money. Money I saved specifically for my wedding. Taking it without my permission was wrong. My father leaned forward. The account has both your name and your mother's on it, legally. Either of you can withdraw funds at any time. That was when I realized they had consulted a lawyer before doing this. They knew exactly what legal ground they stood on, how far they could push this. The realization was like ice water in my veins. We left without resolution to me. Parents convinced they had done nothing wrong. Sophie already planning how to spend the money that remained after her program tuition, and me feeling more determined than ever to fight back the next day. I called my best friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal at a law firm. They did what, she exclaimed after I explained. The situation, Amanda, that is messed up, technically legal because of the joint account, but morally reprehensible. So there is nothing I can do. I didn't say that. Just because the account is joint does not mean they can just take your money for whatever they want. There are legal concepts like unjust enrichment, constructive trusts. Let me talk to one of our attorneys and get back to you. Over the next week, I did my research. I met with a financial advisor who helped me document the history of deposits into the account, all coming from my paychecks, all labeled wedding. In the transaction notes, I gathered emails between Daniel and me discussing wedding vendors and plans that predated the theft. I documented the timing of the transfer and the highly suspicious events at Thanksgiving. Daniel supported me through it all, despite the increasing pressure from my family. My parents called him, trying to convince him to talk me out of pursuing the money. They sent flying monkeys in the form of aunts, uncles, and family friends who called to tell me how disappointed they were in my selfishness. Family has to come first. Aunt Kathy lectured me over the phone. Is that why my parents stole from me? I replied before hanging up. I wavered at times, the lifelong conditioning to put family harmony above my own needs, nearly overwhelming my resolve. One night, I broke down, crying in Daniel's arms. What if they never speak to me again? I sobbed. What if pursuing this money costs me my family? Daniel held me tight. A family that would steal from you and expect you to thank them for it. Is that really a family worth preserving at all costs? His Words hit home. What kind of relationship did I actually have with my parents if their love was conditional on my constant sacrifice? What kind of future would Daniel and I have if I allowed this precedent to be set before we were even married? I drafted a formal letter with the help of Jessica's lawyer friend, demanding the return of my funds within 10 days or I would pursue legal action. I sent it certified mail to ensure they could not claim they never received it. The deadline came and went. My mother called the day after. "I cannot believe you would threaten to sue your own family," she said, her voice trembling with what I now recognized as manipulative emotion. "After everything we have done for you, I gave you a chance to make this right," I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You chose not to take it. Sophie needs this money more than you do. That is not your decision to make with my money. So what now? You will drag your family into courts, air our private business in public, destroy our reputation in the community." The old Amanda would have backed down at this point, accepted the loss to keep peace, but something had fundamentally shifted inside me. "Yes," I said simply, "that is exactly what I am going to do." Finding the right lawyer was crucial. Jessica recommended several from her firm, but I eventually chose Rachel Winters, a straight-talking attorney who specialized in family financial disputes. During our initial consultation, I laid out the entire situation, not sparing any details about the family dynamics that had led to this point. "Family cases are always complicated," Rachel said after I finished. "But this one is actually quite clear-cut. Joint account or not, we can make a strong case that this money was earmarked for a specific purpose, that your parents knew this purpose, and that they acted in bad faith." We spent the next 2 weeks gathering evidence, bank statements showing regular deposits labeled wedding going back 7 years, emails between Daniel and me discussing wedding venues and budgets, screenshots of text messages with my mother where I specifically mentioned saving for the wedding, social media posts where I had occasionally mentioned my progress toward my wedding fund goal. "What about witnesses?" Rachel asked. "Anyone who can testify that this money was known to be for your wedding." I immediately thought of Jessica, who had heard me talk about my wedding fund for years, Daniel's parents, who had offered to contribute to our honeymoon as their gift since they knew we were covering the wedding ourselves, even my cousin Taylor, who had asked me directly at Thanksgiving about what would happen to our wedding plans. Rachel sent a formal legal letter to my parents, more detailed and threatening than my initial one. It outlined the specific claims we were prepared to make in court, the evidence we had gathered, and one last opportunity to return the funds before we filed suit. The response was swift and furious. My father called, shouting into the phone, "You ungrateful child. After everything we have done for you, consider yourself disowned if you pursue this ridiculous lawsuit." Sophie sent a barrage of texts, alternating between guilt trips and vicious attacks. "You have always been jealous of me. Now you are trying to ruin my one chance at a real career. Mom has been crying for 2 days straight because of you. Why do you hate me so much? What kind of sister sues her own family? I thought you loved me. Then you and your stupid fiancé think you are so perfect with your boring jobs and your boring life. Some of us want more than that." I blocked her number after that last one. extended family members began calling, most trying to talk sense into me. My father's sister, Aunt Martha, reminded me that family disputes should stay private. My mother's brother suggested I was acting rashly and should consider the long-term consequences. My grandmother, usually my ally, expressed concern about what this conflict might do to your mother's health. To my surprise, one relative stood firmly in my corner, Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, who had always seemed to notice the disparity in how my sister and I were treated. "Good for you, Amanda," she said when she called. "They have been doing this to you your whole life, expecting you to give and Sophie to take. It stops now or it never stops." The family was clearly divided, with most taking my parents' side publicly while a few reached out privately to express support. The pressure was intense, but instead of weakening my resolve, it only strengthened it. Every manipulative call or text became another piece of evidence that I was doing the right thing. Daniel's parents were wonderful throughout the ordeal. When they learned what had happened, they immediately offered to help with wedding costs. "We cannot replace the whole amount," Daniel's mother said, "but we can help you have the day you deserve." I was touched by their generosity but declined. This wasn't about the money anymore. Not really. It was about standing up for myself after a lifetime of giving in. Rachel suggested we try mediation before going to court, process where a neutral third party would help us reach a resolution. My parents initially agreed, then backed out the day before, claiming they should not have to negotiate about helping their daughter. Their lawyer, a family friend who seemed uncomfortable with the whole situation, suggested they were exploring other options, whatever that meant. As the court date approached, Rachel prepared me for what to expect. "Be ready for them to paint you as the villain," she warned. "They will talk about how successful you are, how much Sophie needs this money, how this is just family helping family. Stay calm, stick to the facts, and remember that this is not about Sophie's needs versus yours. It is about your parents taking your money without permission for a purpose other than what it was saved for." I practiced answering potential questions, worked on keeping my emotions in check, and tried to prepare for seeing my family in an adversarial setting. Daniel came to every preparation meeting, taking notes and asking insightful questions. The hardest part, Rachel told us both, will be the public nature of this. Family court records are public. People in your community might hear about this. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it seriously. Was I ready for neighbors, colleagues, and acquaintances to potentially learn about this ugly family dispute? The old Amanda would have been mortified, would have paid any price to avoid public embarrassment. But I was not that person anymore. "Let them see," I said finally. "Let everyone see exactly what kind of people my parents are." 2 days before the court date, I received a text from Sophie. "Hope you are happy. You are tearing this family apart for money. So much for being the responsible one." I did not respond, but I saved the message as one final piece of evidence. The next day, I received formal confirmation that our case would be heard at the county courthouse at 9 a.m. that night. I barely slept, alternating between anxiety about the confrontation and a strange, calm certainty that I was finally doing what I should have done years ago, standing up for myself. The morning of the court date, I woke at 5:30 after just a few hours of fitful sleep. I showered, dried my hair, and put on the conservative navy blue dress and jacket Rachel had suggested. Professional, but not flashy, she had advised. We want the judge to see you as responsible and reasonable. Daniel made breakfast, though neither of us ate much. He wore a charcoal gray suit and a tie I had given him for his birthday. As we drove to the courthouse, he reached over and squeezed my hand. No matter what happens in there, he said, I am proud of you for standing up for yourself. We arrived 45 minutes early, as Rachel had instructed, and found her waiting on the courthouse steps inside the lobby. I immediately spotted my parents and Sophie sitting stiffly on a bench. My mother wore a subdued floral dress that made her look older and more fragile than Yusula's strategic choice. I was sure Sophie had toned down her typically flashy style for a modest beige pantsuit that I suspected was new and expensive. My father, in his best suit, stared straight ahead, refusing to acknowledge our presence. The tension in the waiting area was palpable. Other people waiting for their cases seemed to sense the discord, giving our two separate groups a wide berth. I caught snippets of whispered conversations, wondering if they were discussing us or their own legal troubles. Our courthouse served a small county where many families had known each other for generations. I recognized several people in the building, including my high school English teacher and the pharmacists from the drugstore where I had worked one summer during college. The idea that these community members might witness our family drama added another layer of discomfort. But I reminded myself that I had nothing to be ashamed of. At 9:15, we were called into courtroom. Judge Ella Hoffman, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes, presided. After introductions and preliminary statements from both lawyers, I was called to testify first. Rachel guided me through my narrative, having me explain how long I had been saving, what the money was intended for, and the events of Thanksgiving. I described finding out about the transfer, the conversations with my parents afterward, and their refusal to return the funds despite multiple requests. And at any point, Rachel asked, "Did you give permission for your parents to take this money and give it to your sister?" "No," I said firmly. "Never." My parents' lawyer, Mr. Bryson, began his cross-examination with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Miss Wilson, would you describe yourself as financially secure?" "I have a stable job." "Yes." "And your fiancé is also employed in the financial sector, correct?" "Yes." "He works as a financial analyst, so between the two of you, you make a comfortable living. We work hard for what we have." "And your sister, is she currently employed?" "No. She was let go from her last position. So she has no income at present." "Not that I am aware of, and this program she wants to attend, this could lead to stable employment for her. It could, if she completes it and pursues work in that field consistently." His questions continued in this vein, clearly trying to establish that I did not need the money as much as Sophie did. Rachel had prepared me for this line of questioning, reminding me that need was irrelevant to the legal question of whether my parents had the right to take my money without permission. Next, financial evidence was presented. My bank statements showing years of regular deposits labeled wedding, emails with wedding vendors discussing deposits and payment schedules, text messages where I had specifically told my mother about reaching savings milestones for my wedding fund. When my parents took the stand, they told a different story. According to them, the account had always been intended as a family emergency fund, despite my being the only one who ever contributed to it. My mother claimed we had discussed using the money for Sophie's education weeks before things, conversation that had never happened. Amanda agreed that family has to support each other in times of need, my mother testified, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. And you took that as permission to transfer the entire amount to your younger daughter, Rachel asked during cross-examination. We made a family decision, my father interjected from his seat, earning a sharp look from the judge. Please, only answer questions when you are on the stand, sir, Judge Hoffman said firmly. Sophie's testimony was particularly difficult to sit through. She portrayed herself as struggling but determined, finally finding her true calling after years of searching. She described me as a golden child who had everything come easily, who had always been our parents' favorite. I nearly laughed out loud at this complete inversion of reality. Amanda has always been so successful, Sophie said, her voice breaking artificially. I just needed this one chance to follow my dream. When Daniel took the stand, he was calm and factual, describing our wedding planning process, the vendors we had already paid deposits to, and the explicit discussions we had with my parents about using the fund for our wedding. At any point, Rachel asked him, did Amanda indicate to you that she had agreed to give this money to her sister instead? Absolutely not, Daniel replied. She was shocked and devastated when they announced it at Thanksgiving. We had just met with our venue the week before to discuss payment schedules. Jessica testified next, describing years of friendship during which I had consistently talked about saving for my future wedding. It was her dream, Jessica said, to pay for her own wedding without going into debt. She turned down trips, lived frugally, worked overtime, all to build that fund. Throughout the proceedings, I watched my parents' faces. My mother maintained an expression of wounded martyrdom, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes. My father shifted between stern disapproval and poorly concealed anger. During one particularly pointed question from Rachel, he broke his composure. "This is ridiculous," he exclaimed. "Parents should not have to justify helping one child to another. Sophie needed the money," Amanda added. End of story. Judge Hoffman's gaze sharpened. "Mr. Wilson, outbursts are not permitted in my courtroom. Your attorney will have the opportunity to make closing arguments." My mother tried a different approach during her redirect examination, tears flowing freely now. "We have always wanted what is best for both our girls. Amanda has been so blessed, so capable. Sophie has struggled. Is it wrong for parents to try to level the playing field?" The judge's expression gave nothing away, but I noticed her making notes during this statement. Finally, both attorneys made their closing arguments. Mr. Bryson emphasized family obligation, parents' rights to make decisions for the family as a whole, and Sophie's greater need. Rachel focused on the specific purpose of the account, my consistent contributions, and the deceptive way the money had been taken without my knowledge or consent. "This is not about whether Sophie deserves help," Rachel concluded. "This is about whether the defendants had the right to take Miss Wilson's money saved over 7 years, specifically for her wedding, and give it to someone else without her permission. The evidence clearly shows they did not. Judge Hoffman announced she would take 30 minutes to review the evidence before delivering her decision. Those 30 minutes were the longest of my life. Daniel, Rachel, and I waited in a small conference room, not speaking much. Through the window, I could see my family huddled with their attorney on a bench outside, Sophie gesturing animatedly while my father nodded when we returned to the courtroom. Judge Hoffman's expression was serious but resolved. In the case of Wilson versus Wilson, she began, I have carefully considered the evidence presented by both sides. While I understand the defendant's desire to help their younger daughter in a time of need, the evidence clearly shows that the plaintiff established this account for a specific purpose, was the sole contributor to the account over a period of 7 years, and consistently designated these funds for her wedding. My heart began to race. The fact that the defendants had technical legal access to the account as joint account holders does not grant them the moral or legal right to appropriate these funds against the plaintiff's wishes and for a purpose entirely different from the one for which they were saved. I felt Daniel's hand tighten around mine. Therefore, I rule in favor of the plaintiff. The defendants are ordered to return the full amount of $35,000 to the plaintiff within 30 days, plus legal fees and court costs. I exhaled slowly, feeling as though I had been holding my breath for months, not minutes. Across the aisle, my mother's face crumpled. My father's jaw tightened to a rigid line. Sophie stood abruptly and left the courtroom. It was over. I had one dot as we exited the courtroom. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. I had taken my parents to court and won. The money would be returned, but at what cost? Sophie was nowhere to be seen, but my parents stood rigidly by the courthouse entrance, my mother openly crying now as relatives who had attended the hearing gathered around her. Let us take a different exit, Rachel suggested quietly, guiding us toward a side door. We were almost there when Sophie's voice rang out behind us, high and furious. Are you happy now? You have ruined everything. I turned to see her storming across the lobby, her face contorted with anger and humiliation. Several people stopped to stare, including a local news reporter who happened to be covering another case. My program starts in 3 weeks. What am I supposed to do now? Sophie demanded, her voice echoing in the marble hallway. Daniel stepped slightly in front of me, protective but not interfering. Sophie, this is not the place, I said quietly. Of course, it is not. You have had your public victory, made Mom and Dad look like criminals, and now you want to slink away. Privately, well, everyone should know what kind of sister you really are. My mother appeared behind her, reaching for her arm. Sophie, please, we will figure something out. Figure what out? How to come up with $35,000 in 30 days. I gave up my apartment. I paid the program deposit. Sophie was nearly screaming now. A courthouse security officer approached. Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice or take this outside. Rachel skillfully maneuvered us toward the exit while Sophie continued her tirade, now directed at the security officer and anyone else who would listen. The last thing I saw before the door closed behind us was my father's face, a mask of cold fury as he watched us leave. Dot, in the parking lot. Relatives I had not even realized were in the courthouse emerged in small clusters. Most avoided eye contact with me, hustling to their cars with heads down. My cousin Taylor hesitated, then gave me a small, sad smile before joining her parents. Uncle Jim surprisingly approached us directly. "That could not have been easy," he said gruffly, "but it was the right thing. They have always played favorite with you two girls." The unexpected support made my eyes sting with tears. Thank you, Uncle Jim. The drive home was quiet, emotional. I felt vindicated, but also deeply sad. These were my parents, my sister. Despite everything, I loved them. The fact that they had pushed me to this point, that they still could not see how wrong their actions had been, was heartbreaking. "What happens now?" Daniel asked as we pulled into our apartment complex. "I do not know," I admitted. "I guess we wait for the money to be returned and see if there is anything left to salvage." The next few days brought a flurry of reactions from extended family and friends as news of the court case spread through our community. Social media became a minefield. Without naming me directly, Sophie posted a long, self-bidding screed about toxic family members who only care about money and dreams being crushed by selfish people. Several relatives commented with heart emojis and supportive messages. My mother posted nothing, but friends reported seeing her at church looking absolutely devastated, accepting condolences as if there had been a death in the family. My father told colleagues at his accounting firm that he was dealing with a difficult family situation, positioning himself as the stoic patriarch bearing up under trying circumstances. The phone calls came next. Some relatives called to express shock that I had taken things so far. Others, mostly from my generation of cousins, quietly admitted they thought my parents had been wrong. A few friends who had witnessed years of the dysfunctional family dynamic expressed relief that I had finally stood up for myself. Daniel's family, bless them, called to ask practical questions. When would the money be returned? Should we restart wedding planning? Could they help with anything in the meantime? Their straightforward support was a balm amid the emotional chaos. As Christmas approached, the question of holiday plans loomed large. Traditionally, we spent Christmas Eve at my parents' house and Christmas Day with Daniel's family. This year, no invitation from my parents arrived. When Daniel's mother heard this, she immediately expanded their invitation. "You will spend both days with us," she insisted. "You are family already as far as we are concerned." The holiday season passed in a strange mix of relief and grief. I felt lighter, unburdened from the expectation of constant sacrifice. Yet, I mourned the family relationships I had always hoped for, but never truly had. Wedding planning resumed cautiously. The 30-day deadline for returning my money came and went with no communication from my parents. On day 31, the full amount appeared in my account via bank transfer, no message attached. Our original wedding venue had given away our date when we were forced to delay our deposit.